Some men get loud when they've been wronged. They make calls, send emails with their chest, copy everyone and their HR department. Me? I took 3 days off work, drove out to the lake house my wife and I used to rent every October, and started making a very quiet, very specific plan. I'm Leonard Marsh, 58 years old, retired high school history teacher turned private tutor, born in Columbus, raised in Cincinnati, transplanted to Nashville 22 years ago, because Linda wanted to be closer to her sister and I would have followed that woman to the Arctic if she'd asked me to. She passed 4 years ago. Ovarian cancer. 61 days from diagnosis to the end. The kind of timeline that doesn't give you room to prepare, only to witness. I know how loss reshapes a person. What I didn't know, what I had to learn the hard way, is that grief sometimes makes the people around you think you've become easy to manage. This story starts with a fishing trip. Linda and I had planned it for years. Not a casual weekend on a pond somewhere, but a real trip. 2 weeks in Alaska, the Kenai Peninsula, the Russian River, fly fishing for sockeye salmon in water, so cold and clean you could drink it. We'd read about it in a magazine at our dentist's office in 2016, and Linda had torn out the page and tucked it into her purse while the hygienist pretended not to notice. That was Linda. She was not a woman who waited for permission to want things. After she died, I found that magazine page folded inside the cover of her planner. She'd written 3 words across the top in her handwriting, which was loopy and leaned to the right like everything she wrote was in a hurry to get somewhere. She'd written, "Us, someday, promise." I held that piece of paper for a long time at the kitchen table in our house on Cartwright Drive. Then I started planning. It took me 14 months to put it together. Alaska is not a cheap trip, not if you're doing it right, and I was doing it right. I booked through a specialist outfitter, a company out of Anchorage called Ridgeline Expeditions that ran fully guided fly fishing tours with lodging in a private riverside cabin. All meals included, daily guided access to the Russian and Kenai rivers, gear rental, the works. The total came to $9,400 for a 12-night package, non-refundable after 60 days out. I paid the full deposit in January and cleared the balance in March. I had the confirmation in a folder on my desktop I'd labeled, without any irony at all, Linda's trip. My daughter, Paige, knew about it. Paige is 31, works in hospital administration, has her mother's organizational brain and my stubbornness, which is a combination that makes her excellent at her job and occasionally exhausting as a daughter. I love her unreservedly. She had actually helped me pick the specific cabin, had spent a Sunday afternoon on the phone with me going through the Ridgeline website, reading reviews out loud, saying things like, "Dad, this one has a fire pit and a covered porch. That's the one." I booked the cabin with the fire pit and the covered porch. What I did not know, what I would not learn until much later, was that Paige had shown those same booking details to her boyfriend's mother. The boyfriend was a man named Trent Okafor. Trent was 34, worked in financial planning, drove a truck that was too big for Nashville traffic, and was, by all my observations, a decent enough man. He laughed at appropriate moments. He always stood up when I walked into a room, which I noticed and appreciated. He called me Mr. Marsh without being reminded. I had no issues with Trent. Trent's mother was a different matter. Her name was Arlene. Arlene Okafor was 64, twice remarried, currently between husbands in a way she described as intentional, and operated with the absolute conviction that her presence in any situation was a form of service to the people around her. She was the kind of woman who sent back food at restaurants for reasons that were more philosophical than practical. She wore linen in every color and made comments about other people's homes that were framed as compliments, but landed like appraisals. She had walked through my living room once, looked at the built-in bookshelves Linda and I had put in together, and said, "Oh, this is very you." I still don't know what that meant. I know it wasn't good. I tolerated Arlene because Paige loved Trent. That was sufficient reason. The call came on a Wednesday morning in April. I was in my home office prepping a tutoring session, U.S. history, the progressive era, a topic I can teach in my sleep but still enjoy because the story of people fighting for reform against entrenched power never really goes out of style. My phone buzzed on the desk. Paige. "Hey, sweetheart." "Hey, Dad." A pause I recognized immediately. The page pause. She uses it when she's about to say something she's rehearsed and still doesn't feel ready for. I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond. I put down my pen. The Alaska trip, she said. I think you need to cancel it. The room went quiet in the way rooms do when your brain has to work harder than normal to process what it just heard. Paige, I know, Dad, and I'm sorry, but Arlene and Trent's sister Bridget have been wanting to do a big trip. Something to mark Arlene turning 65 this summer, and Trent mentioned the Alaska trip, and Arlene saw the details when I had them up on my laptop, and she said, Paige stopped, collected herself. She said it seemed like something you'd probably want to offer, given that you're going alone, and it's so much money for one person, and she felt like it might even be good for you to wait another year. I set my pen down very carefully on the desk. Good for me, I said. Dad. Arlene decided it would be good for me to cancel a $9,000 non-refundable fishing trip that I planned for a year and a half. She didn't say it like that. How did she say it? Paige went quiet. Paige. Am I on that trip? What? Are you booked on that trip? Is your name anywhere on that reservation? No, but is Trent's name on that reservation? Dad, that's not the point. Is Arlene's name on that reservation? Silence. The kind that confirms everything. I'll call you back, I said. Dad, just don't do anything yet. Arlene was going to call the outfitter herself to explain the situation. She said she had a friend in the travel industry who could help facilitate a name transfer. I put the phone on the desk face down and sat there looking at the window for about 90 seconds. Outside, a cardinal was sitting on the fence post at the edge of the yard, which is a thing that has happened in my yard my entire adult life, and which Linda used to say was good luck. I looked at the cardinal. The cardinal looked back at me with the complete indifference of a creature that has no concept of Arlene Okafor. I picked the phone back up. Don't let her call anyone, I said. I'll handle this myself. Okay, Paige said quietly. Okay, Dad. I'm sorry. I know you are. I hung up. Here is what I know about myself. I don't make decisions when I'm angry. Not because I can't, but because the decisions I make angry are always slightly wrong in ways that take months to fully understand. Linda used to say I was the only person she'd ever met who could be furious and patient simultaneously. She meant it as a compliment. I took it as operational advice. I sat with this for exactly one evening. I made dinner, ate at the kitchen table, did the dishes, fed the dog, a 9-year-old beagle named Chester who has no opinions about any of this, and went to bed. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:52. I didn't recognize the number. Nashville area code but not a contact. Leonard, this is Arlene. She said it the way news anchors say their own names, like the introduction itself was an event. Arlene, how did you get this number? Oh, Trent had it. A small laugh. Practiced. The sound of someone who has spent decades making social friction disappear through sheer force of pleasantness. I just wanted to reach out personally, because I think there may have been some confusion about what I suggested to Paige, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. I'd like that too, I said. What page are we on? Well, I spoke with someone at the outfitter yesterday. I stopped her there. You called Ridgeline just to ask some general questions about their transfer policy, and they were very helpful, actually. It turns out that with the right documentation, a booking can sometimes be reassigned to a new. Arlene. She stopped. That booking is in my name. It was made with my money. It is for a trip that my late wife and I planned together before she died. I kept my voice even, not cold. Even. I would like you to tell me what documentation you presented to my outfitter to begin a name transfer process on a reservation that is not yours. A pause, shorter than Paige's but heavier. I may have implied that I was calling on your behalf, she said. You may have implied. Leonard, I think if you hear me out. I've heard enough, I said. Do not call Ridgeline again. Do not involve yourself in this reservation in any way. I will handle my own travel arrangements. I hung up. Then I opened my laptop and called Ridgeline Expeditions. The woman who answered was named Becca. I explained, calmly and with appropriate detail, that someone had called the previous day claiming to represent me and had been making inquiries about transferring my reservation. Becca confirmed this, said the caller had not succeeded in changing anything because name transfers require written authorization from the original account holder, but that she'd flagged the call as unusual. I thanked her. I told her I would need to make a change to my booking, but not the kind the previous caller had in mind. I want to cancel the current cabin, I said, and I'd like to know what other availability you have for the same 2-week window. Becca pulled up the system. There was a cancellation, she told me, that had just opened on the Kenai side. A different cabin, more remote, accessible only by a short floatplane transfer from the main lodge. Private stretch of river. No shared access with other guests. A wood-burning stove. A wraparound deck with unobstructed mountain views. How much? I asked. She told me. It was $2,200 more than what I'd paid, even after applying my refund credit from the original booking. Book it, I said. Yes, sir, said Becca. She had the tone of a person who understood, on some level, that something satisfying had just happened and was professionally declining to comment on it. I closed the laptop, sat back, took a long breath. Outside the window, Chester was sleeping in a patch of afternoon sun in the backyard, which is his occupation and his purpose, and I respect him for it. I didn't tell Paige about the new cabin. I didn't tell anyone. I made no announcements, sent no messages, issued no warnings. I drove to the airport on a Sunday morning in June with one checked bag, a carry-on with my rain gear, and a new fly rod in a travel case that the gate agent looked at with mild alarm before waving me through. I flew to Anchorage. I took the connecting shuttle to the lodge. I met the floatplane pilot, a woman named Darcy, who had exactly one facial expression and used it to convey the full range of human emotion. She flew me 20 minutes over terrain so beautiful it felt invented, and landed the plane on a stretch of river that I can only describe as the color of Linda's eyes in sunlight, which is not an objective measurement of a river, but it was what I thought when I saw it. The cabin was exactly what I needed. Timber frame, river stone fireplace, the deck that Becca had described with the mountain view. I stood on that deck for a long time my first evening, holding a cup of coffee that was getting cold in the Alaska air, looking at peaks that had been there since before any human being had a name for them. I said out loud to no one, to Linda, to the water moving below, "Here we are." My phone had 37 unread messages. I set it on the kitchen counter, face down, and went to bed. The calls started on day 2. I saw Paige's name flash across the screen while I was on the river in waders, following Darcy's directions for reading the current. I let it go to voicemail. By dinner, it had come twice more. By the end of day 3, 6 times. I turned the sound off and left the phone on the counter each morning when I went to the river. I want to be precise about this. I was not ignoring my daughter out of cruelty. I was on a 12-night wilderness trip that I had planned for 14 months as a way of keeping a promise to a woman I had loved for 30 years, and I had spent the preceding weeks being lied to and quietly maneuvered out of something that was mine. I was owed 12 nights of peace and cold water and silence. I was collecting. But text previews accumulate even on a muted phone. Day 2. Dad, call me when you can. Arlene has some questions about the day 3 dad. Arlene went to the outfitter's office in Anchorage. She says the original booking doesn't exist anymore. Day 4. Dad, something happened. Please call. I left that one unread. Went back to the river. Day 5 arrived with a shift in tone I could see even from the preview. It was a Saturday. The salmon were moving well that morning, and Darcy had put me on a run below a gravel bend that was, she said, the best spot on the river for 2 miles in either direction. She was not wrong. I had the best morning of fishing I've had in 20 years. I ate lunch on a boulder in the middle of the current, just me and a sandwich and the sound of water, and I thought about Linda saying us, someday, promise, and I was okay. I was genuinely okay in a way I hadn't expected to be so soon. When I got back to the cabin, I sat on the deck with a beer and scrolled. The sequence read like a play that had gotten away from its director. Page, day 3. Arlene went to the Ridgeline office in Anchorage. She had printouts of your original confirmation that she must have photographed from my laptop. The woman at the desk told her the booking had been fully canceled, and a new one was never opened under the same name. Arlene is extremely upset. She and Bridget drove to Anchorage specifically to start the check-in process early, and now they have no reservation. Trent, day 3. Leonard, there seems to have been an error with the booking. My mother is at the Ridgeline office. and they have no record of any active reservation. Can you call me when you get this? Arlene, day 4. Leonard, I don't know what's happened, but I want to handle this with grace. Please call me. We need to clarify the situation before this becomes something bigger than it needs to be. I paused on handle this with grace. I read it twice. Page, day 4, 3 hours later. Dad, Arlene had to book an emergency package through a different outfitter. It's not a private cabin, it's a shared lodge situation, group tours, no private river access. She's furious and Trent is upset, and I don't know what to tell them because I don't know what happened. Please call me. Trent, day 4, she had to share a transport van with 9 strangers. Leonard. 9. I'm not blaming you, but I'm trying to understand what happened with the original booking. She is really upset. Arlene, day 5. Leonard. I've spoken with a travel attorney. What you've done may constitute deliberate interference with an anticipated business arrangement, and I intend to understand my options fully before I let this go. I read that 3 times. Then I set the phone down on the deck railing, picked up my beer, and looked at the mountain across the river, which had been there for somewhere between 30 and 60 million years, and which had, in that time, witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations and was not especially troubled by Arlene Okafor's travel. Attorney. I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that startles Chester when it happens at home. The kind Linda used to say meant I'd found the actual funny thing, not just the surface of it. A travel attorney. From a shared fishing lodge on the Kenai Peninsula. I kept reading. Page, day 5, evening. Dad, I know you're reading these. I know you're there. I need to say that I'm sorry. I should have never shown her the booking details. I should have told you immediately when she started asking about the reservation. I got scared of the conflict and I handled it wrong, and I know that. I'm sorry about Mom's trip. I know what it means. I'm sorry. I read that one only once, but I held it for a while. Page, day 7. Trent says his mom upgraded to a private cabin mid-trip because she couldn't stand the group tours. It cost her an extra $3,400 out of pocket, and she's not speaking to him about it. I don't know where you are, but I hope it's beautiful. I looked up at the mountain. I hope it's beautiful. I wrote back to Paige, just Paige. Not Arlene, not Trent. It's the most beautiful place I've ever been. I'll call you from the river tomorrow morning, she replied in 40 seconds. Just, okay, love you, Dad. I called her the next morning standing in the shallows in my waders, the water rushing around my knees, the mountains going pink at their peaks in the early light. Where are you? She said. On the river. Silence. Then, you're on a different trip. Campused the original cabin the same morning. Arlene called to tell me she'd already contacted the outfitter on my behalf. Booked a private floatplane cabin, more remote, better river access. A longer silence. Dad, I know. She called a travel attorney. I heard. She said you committed deliberate interference with an anticipated business arrangement. I canceled a reservation in my name that I had paid for in full, I said. The attorney apparently confirmed this was legal, which is why nothing further happened. Paige made a sound I couldn't fully categorize. Not quite a laugh, not quite a sob, something in between that meant she was reassembling. Are you angry at me? She asked. I watched the current for a moment. Downstream, a merganser duck was riding the water with the energy of a creature that had never doubted its place in the world. I said. Not anymore. You got caught in something that moved faster than you could manage, and you made a bad call. You know that. I know that. Arlene is good at creating momentum, I said. She moves before people have time to think. That's not your fault, but it's something you need to see clearly. Paige was quiet for a moment. What do I tell Trent? That's between you and Trent, I said. But if he's with a woman who impersonates people to steal their travel reservations and then threatens lawyers when she gets caught, that's information. She didn't say anything. Is it beautiful? She asked finally. Really? I looked up at the mountain. A bald eagle was working a thermal above the tree line, riding it in long circles without effort, the way things that belong somewhere move through it. Your mother would have loved it, I said. She did love it. I made sure of it. Paige cried a little then. I let her. I'll tell you what I pieced together afterward, partly from Paige, partly from Trent, who in the weeks that followed revealed himself to be a genuinely honest man, caught between his own decency and his loyalty to a mother who had made manipulation look like love for 30 years. Arlene and Bridget had driven to Anchorage 2 days before the trip's departure. Arlene had photographs of the original booking confirmation on her phone, taken from Paige's laptop screen without Paige's knowledge. She had brought printed copies. She had apparently told the woman at the Ridgeline front desk that she was coordinating travel arrangements for the Marsh family. The front desk woman had looked up the reservation, found nothing active, and told her so. Arlene had insisted there was an error. The front desk woman had called Becca. Becca had confirmed, politely and finally, that the reservation in that name no longer existed, and that there was no associated booking open under any variant of the name she'd been given. Arlene had, by Trent's account, stood at that front desk for 22 minutes, asking the same question in different framings, before accepting that there was nothing to be done. The emergency alternative she'd booked was a group package through a different operator, which meant a van with 9 other guests for the river transfers, a bunkroom lodge rather than a private cabin, and morning fishing slots assigned by a rotation schedule. Arlene had apparently spent the first 4 days photographing the experience in ways that minimized its group nature before giving up and upgrading to the private cabin that opened mid-trip. The upgrade cost her $3,400. The private cabin was nice, Trent said. Comfortable. Good river view. Not a floatplane cabin. Not a private stretch of river. Not wraparound mountain views and a wood-burning stove, and the specific silence of a place that most people will never see. She'd shared the trip on social media. I know because Paige showed me one post when I got home. A photo of a river. The caption said something about embracing adventure and the healing power of Alaska. There were 43 comments, all positive. In the photo you could see, just at the edge of the frame, the corner of the group lodge and the roof of the adjacent van. I did not comment. There is one more thing. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Chester climbed into my lap, which he physically shouldn't be able to do at his size, but attempts anyway, and I've never had the heart to stop him. I went through the mail. I drank a cup of coffee. And then I wrote Arlene a letter. Not an email. A letter, handwritten on paper I'd bought at a stationery shop near the airport in Anchorage. The kind of paper that has weight to it. I kept it short. I told her I hoped the trip had been meaningful. I told her that I understood she had wanted something, and that wanting things is not itself a flaw. I told her that the reservation she had tried to access was not a travel booking. It was the last promise I had made to my wife, in her handwriting, on a piece of paper I still carry in my wallet, and that I had honored it in the best way I knew how, and that whatever she chose to do with her attorneys or her opinions about my behavior, that was entirely hers to carry. I signed it with my full name. I did not include a return address. Paige came over for dinner the following Sunday. She brought Trent, which I thought was either brave or a good sign, and it turned out to be both. We ate at the kitchen table, and I showed them some of the photographs from the cabin deck. The mountain, turning colors, in the evening light, the stretch of river from the fishing run, the single photograph I'd taken of Linda's us, someday, promised Paige, sitting on the wooden railing with the Alaskan water behind it. Trent looked at that last one for a long time. He said quietly, "I'm sorry, Leonard, for my mother and for all of it." I told him I appreciated that. "She's not a bad person," he said. He stopped, looked at the photo again. "She doesn't understand that some things aren't available." I thought about that for a while. It was the most honest thing anyone had said through this whole situation. "No," I said, "she doesn't." The photo on my phone now, saved as my wallpaper, is from the last morning on the river. Darcy had taken it from the bank. While I was in the shallows, the rod bent. Something heavy on the line, pulling toward the deep current. Mountains behind me, water white at the edges, the sky the particular blue that Alaska does in the morning before the clouds come in. You can see, if you look at my face, that I'm not performing anything, not documenting, not posing, not making a point. Just a man on a river in the place his wife wanted to go, in water cold enough to remind you you're alive. I'm Leonard Marsh, 58 years old. I don't snap, I don't escalate, I don't argue with people who've already decided what they're entitled to. I cancel the cabin they tried to take, book a better one they'll never see, and I go fishing. Some promises take longer than you planned. That doesn't mean you don't keep them. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button and subscribe. There are more of these. More people who thought they were the smartest one in the room. They were not. I'll be here.